of DearPiggy's JavaScript course. So this video is going to be the second part of class number 1. And in this video, we are going to be working with variables, operations that we can do with variables, as well as data types. So these three are all relatively connected topics. You know what? Let's jump right in. So variables in JavaScript, there are actually 3 types. So we'll quickly introduce all of them, but we're only going to be really working with one. So there are 3 different types. The first one is var, the second one is let, and the third one is const. So these are all 3 different types of variables, can all be used. However, there are different uses for every single one. We will get deeper into every single one, like in what their uses are and why they're more beneficial for every topic in about lesson 4 or 5. But today, in this first video, we're going to be working with just var. So for variables, there are 2 steps. There's the declaration and the assignment. We can do this in 2 separate lines, or we can do it in 1 line. Either way, it doesn't matter. Now, variables are really useful, guys, because they can store values and can be reused over and over again. So say I want to have a certain number of puppies, you could say, but I don't want to keep on writing that number over and over and over when I want to reuse it in my code. By assigning the value to a variable, we can use the variable over and over, and that would make our lives so much easier. Last thing that we want to know about before we go ahead and get started is Camel Case. Every single coding language has its own coding standard. There's always a certain standard as to which everybody does their coding, right? And in this case, Camel Case is the coding standard for how you should name your variables. Camel Case is where the first letter of the first word is lowercase, and then the other letters, the other words, their first letter is always uppercase. So take a look at this picture over here. I'm not sure what these names are. They're very interesting names. Variable studly cap var, proper camel case, and title case over. You'll see that the first word of the variable is always lowercase. The first letter is always lowercase. However, the second and third words, their first letter is always uppercase. So first words, first letter, lowercase. All the other words, first letter is uppercase. And that's what we call camel case. Weird, right? I don't know why people use it, but we just have to go with it, right? So let's go ahead to REPL it, repli.it, our in-browser IDE, and we will create a new lesson, a new REPL, choose HTML, CSS, and create the REPL. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to go to our script.js, and we are going to create a variable. And this variable var, we can say puppies. Var puppies is equal to, let's see, how many puppies do I want to have? I will have 17 puppies, yes. I am a huge fan of puppies. I really want a puppy, but I'm not allowed to have one. But you know what? I think I would probably start with buying 1 puppy first, and then we'll build up to 3, 5, maybe then 17. Might not try to get all 17 at once, right? So now this is how we declare our variable in 1 line. Something that I want to note and point out to you is this ending over here. Right now, I have not added any sort of ending, right? It's just 17 and then that's it. However, in JavaScript, I have the option to add a semicolon at the end. So let me console.log puppies. And in this case, guys, we don't have quotation marks around the puppies because puppies is a variable. When you're printing out the value of a variable, you do not need to add quotation marks around it. We run our code, and in our console, let me drag this up, we see that it's 17. So we see that this works fine. If I get rid of my semicolon here, and then I run my code, we see that we still get 17. So this is something that I really like about JavaScript. Python, in my opinion, when they didn't have anything behind it, I thought that was a little bit too loose. Whereas Java, for example, a semicolon is required. You have to have it. I thought that was too strict. So maybe it's just me being picky, but personally, I like how JavaScript allows you to put a semicolon if you would like. Now, I would always try my best to put a semicolon at the end because in many languages like Java and C#, these semicolons are required. So if you get into the habit of not putting a semicolon behind, then maybe when you move on to a different languages, you're going to get an error message because you don't have a semicolon. So I would like to try to force myself to always put a semicolon at the end, just to get into a good habit of, all coding languages. So we're going to use the semicolon at the end for now. Again, it's totally up to you though. But my point is that we've just created our first variable and we've declared it and assigned it all on one line. Var puppies is equal to with the value and the semicolon behind it. You could do it this way, or there's another way you can do it. Since we have to declare the variable and then assign it, we can do this on two separate lines. So let's do this. Var puppies, and then you put a semicolon and you have to say puppies is equal to 17. So I've just changed this into two separate lines here. Let's see. This will use comments, declaration. This is where I declare that this variable exists. And the next line is where I assign a value to the variable. And let's run our code and we see that we still get 17. So everything is still working fine. And I know some of you guys might be wondering, why would you go through all the trouble of writing an extra line of code when everything could just fit on one line? That's because as you get more advanced in coding in JavaScript, then sometimes your value of puppies changes. So in between these two lines, I know it doesn't seem very possible right now, but when you get more and more advanced, the value of puppies could change. So puppies will not always be 17. So that is why you're allowed to declare it and assign it on two separate lines. We're always going to present all the options to you. You can feel free to choose whichever one you would like. Let's see what else we need to talk about for variables, assignment, variable name, camel case. Aha. So since we only had one word, it just was lowercase all the way through, right? We might try a different variable name later where we can use camel case. And let's see. Okay, let's create another variable that talks about how much I like puppies. We're going to call this var puppy love. And this, guys, is camel case, right? Because puppy is the first word, it's lowercase. The first letter is lowercase. Love is the second word. So the first letter is uppercase. So var puppy love is equal to I love puppies. Okay, so this is where we kind of get a little bit of an introduction to data types coming in. Now that is going to be, we're going to go deeper in just about like 3 minutes, but for now I just want to show you that a variable can have whatever sort of value. In this case, puppies had a number as its value. In this case, we have letters, we have a string as its value. Now since it's a string, you need to put it in quotation marks. I had a great question. It said, how do you know if something is a string? If you put quotation marks around it, then it is a string. If you don't, it's not a string. So these quotation marks, whether it's double quotes or single quotes, that is what makes some letters or some characters a string. So let's go ahead and console.log the value of puppy love. Not puppies, puppy love. And we will run our code and let's see what happens. Run. And I have an error. Puppy love is undefined. So, guys, let's take a look here. What am I doing wrong? Puppy love. So this is not something that most people can see very much. But puppy, I spelled it wrong. I put 3 P's. And I know I messed up. It's okay, but this is a great learning experience for everybody, right? Your variable name is very picky. What you define it as when you declare your variable, whether you spell it right or wrong, that is the name. You cannot put 3 P's over here and then 2 P's over here and expect it to work because our program is not illiterate. It does not understand that you're trying to spell puppy. So now I'm going to make puppy spelled with only 2 P's and we run our code and we get the correct answer. I love puppies. So the mistake that I just made over there was a great example of making sure that the variable name and the name that we use when we console.log, when we print it to the console, they both have to be the same. So that was variables in a nutshell. Variables, again, we used var the entire time. And the reason why var is so good is because it can be redeclared and updated, which means that I can declare this again and I can update it however many times I want. That is one benefit of var. Let's go on to operations with variables. Now, just like math, we can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with variables, assuming that these variables have a number value. And so let's just go ahead and use a comment over here. We see that this plus sign stands for addition. This minus sign stands for subtraction, which we all know. This asterisk, which is the top one on top of the 8, that stands for multiplication, and this slash stands for division. Another bonus one is mod division. It's the percent sign, and that essentially is the remainder. Now, if you guys don't know what mod is, that is totally okay. That's more of something that you understand as you guys learn about it in math. So once you guys learn about it, once you're old enough to learn about it in math, you will understand mod, but that means modulus, or which I like to just think of it as the remainder. So this is kind of like our key. This is what these operations are. We don't need to review these because hopefully we learned all of them when we were in pre-K. Let's go over here and we're going to talk about incrementing and decrementing. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say we're going to work on incrementing / decrementing now. I'm going to create my own variable again, and I'm going to assign it and declare it in one line. Var my num, again using Camel Case, is equal to, let's just use 9 for now. Now, guys, what do you think would happen if I did my num plus plus? So some of the kids, and let me print out the value to the console. Console.log my num. Okay, there we go. So some people said plus plus would give you 81. Some people said plus plus would give you 27. And I all understand where those are coming from, right? It makes complete sense. Some people think you're doing it to the power. Some people think you're multiplying. Some people said 11. They thought you were adding 2. It's actually kind of weird, guys. It's going to give you 10. And the reason why is because if you do plus plus, it basically says add 1. So whatever variable plus plus would be the value plus 1. So that's just something to remember. Now, over here, my num minus minus. And then let's console.log my num again. Most of you guys, some people actually did think that we were going to get 9. Some people, we're going to get 9. Yes, that's the right answer. But some of you guys thought that we would get 8. Now, this is where we really want to go over the order in which the program looks at our code. On line 16, my num is equal to 9. On line 17, since we added 1, my num is equal to 10. On line 18, my num is still equal to 10, except we just printed 10 to the console. Since we know that plus plus is plus 1, we're assuming that minus minus is minus 1, right? But since at line 18, my num had a value of 10, when you subtract 1 from 10, my num is now back to 9. So this my num minus minus and my num plus plus balances everything out. So by looking through this line by line, we kind of see that it goes in chronological order. So that was incrementing and decrementing. Pretty easy to understand, I would believe. And let's talk about shorthand operations. So this shorthand is plus equals, minus equals, multiply equals, and divides equals. Let's go ahead and do that. Shorthand. So say we're going to be using variable, we'll use variable my num, variable num is equal to, let's use 10. 10 is a pretty even number. And so if I did num plus equals 5, what's your guess? What do you think is going to be the value of num? Well, I'll tell you. Num plus equals 5 is the equivalent of num is equal to num plus 5. Okay, so we can go ahead and console.log num. Now another one, num minus, here, no, let's run this one first, because then our values will always be changing. We run our code and we get 15, and that's correct, because 10 plus 5 is 15. So how I want you to think about it is, say, when it says plus equals, just think of it as 10 is equal to 10 plus 5. So num is equal to num plus 5, which is 15. Let's try it again. Num minus equals 5. So this would be num minus 5. What do you guys think would come out now? Probably 5, because 10 minus 5 is 5. And yes, we are correct. Let's work on asterisk equals 5. This multiply equals 5. What are we going to get? This is probably num times equals 5.